Hello, I'm Ahmed Anzaldua. I'll be speaking to you about the first two movements of Durufle's Requiem, the Introit and the Kyrie. The first movement, the Introit, is the beginning of the Mass for the dead. The words of the Introit are, "Grant them eternal rest, O Lord, and let perpetual light shine upon them. A hymn becomes you, O God in Zion, and to you shall a vow be repaid in Jerusalem. Hear my prayer, to you shall all flesh come." Then the first part repeats, "Grant them eternal rest, O Lord, and let perpetual light shine upon them." The piece begins with gentle running notes that move in a repeating pattern that never stops, and it's almost as if it's begun flowing before the piece even starts. It's as if it's been flowing for centuries. And over this accompaniment, Durufle gently places the ancient Gregorian chant melody that would go with this text. Requiem, this melody would have been very familiar and comforting to the first audiences. They grew up in the Catholic Church in a time when Gregorian chant was a part of the service. The melody unfolds over this accompaniment, one phrase at a time, and every time each phrase ends, the women pick up the last note and both echo it and continue to connect it with the next phrase. So, and the women come in. I consider this one of the great openings in music, and the reason for that is because Durufle was one of those rare composers who could express a lot with very little. There are only three things happening, not much. We have the flowing notes of the accompaniment, we have the men's melody based on the Gregorian chant, and we have the women's answers. But using only these three things, Durufle has evoked so much. Durufle establishes connections that span 1,000 years. He connects worlds that are very, very different. He connects the modern world with its luxurious impressionist accompaniment with the chants that are ancient and stark. It's music that at the same time is worldly and beautiful in a worldly sense, but is also very profoundly spiritual. And that in itself already establishes a very profound theological statement, a loving theology where one element doesn't negate the other, but they both come together in perfect unity. There are other connections that are established with just these three things. The low voices of the men, who sing in this range, connect with the high voices of the women, who sing ever higher until they reach this note here. And that establishes a connection between low and high, perhaps symbolizing heaven and earth. And another connection that we get in this opening is a connection between a minor, a sad sonority, and a major sonority, a brighter sonority. And we have both chords at the same time. And this connects sadness for the departed and hope for the afterlife. We have grief and we have comfort. And they're both sounding simultaneously. And Durufle makes little subtle changes to the way he writes it, so that sometimes we get a little bit more of the grief. And sometimes we get a little bit more of the comfort. The first first section of the introit establishes these important connections immediately, and then moves slowly, but it already shows us how ambitious Durufle's conception of the Requiem is, as a work that spans generations and centuries. This movement has the character of a slow-moving procession, and we don't get a real change of that color until we get to the words, "Let perpetual light shine upon them," where we go from this color to this color. And it's just a small moment, but later in the movement, it will become very important. The first section of the introit ends, and then Durufle gives us a contrast. A second section that is in a higher range. It is sung by the women, and the accompaniment is simple. It has a rocking, a comforting character. First, the sopranos sing based on the Requiem chant. And then the altos answer. It's very simple. We just have this gentle accompaniment and the women's voices. And then when the text comes back, "Grant them eternal rest," Durufle comes back to the beginning accompaniment. And we expect the melody to come in again in the men's part, but instead the instruments take the melody, but they take it in a canon where one voice is following the other. And Durufle does something very special with the voices. Instead of giving them the melody that we've heard so far, he just places them singing a single note. Over the instrumental part that has the chant melody. And this becomes a very important element of the Requiem as a whole. It will come back again and again in the movements that will follow the introit. And when we arrive at the words, "and let perpetual light shine," one more time, now Durufle unleashes a dramatic crescendo, the music gets louder, and the choir finally sings in full harmony. And then the movement concludes quietly. Those 16th notes that started the movement become slower and slower and even slower, connecting directly into the next movement.